So in this video, I'm going to be reviewing something that I thought I would never be interested in, and that is a dropper post. Super fun, who knew? In particular, I'm going to be reviewing the Coast suspension dropper post by the brand PNW Components, find out what I like and dislike about it and whether it's for you in this video. Welcome back, Pathless Peddlers, and if you're new to the channel, if you're into the non-competitive side of cycling, riding party pace, the supple life, you have found your people, hit that subscribe button. I'm gonna be completely honest and say that when I first started seeing dropper posts on gravel bikes and road bikes, for me, I thought it was a waste of money and elicited a giant eye roll. It just seemed like more complexity, more stuff the bike industry wanted to sell you, but had limited value. So that was a couple years ago. Fast forward, I've had a chance to try multiple dropper posts on different bikes, as well as test out the Coast suspension dropper post on my own personal bikes. But I have to say, after using a dropper post for an extended period of time on my own personal bikes, on my own local rides, I've started to slowly come around to them and actually think that they provide value and are a good upgrade. I know for me, one of the reasons I resisted a dropper post is actually in how they're marketed towards people. Usually you'll see shots of someone engaging the dropper post and all of a sudden they're doing jumps and rooster tails and all these things. And I'm just not that kind of rider. So for me, that didn't make sense. So I think the biggest improvement in my riding isn't the fact that I'm all of a sudden doing tricks, is that it adds a lot of stability, especially on gravel descents. With a simple push of a lever, it lowered my center of mass and let me get into the drops a lot more easily. This in turn gave me a super stable position, full leverage on the brakes. It also gave me some wiggle room to dance around the bike and let it move beneath me. I also found that this same stability held true in just regular road bike descending. You've seen the riders in the Tour de France where they're kind of laying over the top tube. Well, you can achieve a similar position, but a lot more safely. So I found for me, even though I'm not getting rad, it had real practical value and benefits. Two other instances where I think a dropper post also makes sense is if, let's say you're a mom on a cargo bike and you've got this big heavy load, it makes it really easy to drop the saddle out of the way so you can have both feet planted at a stoplight and be really stable. And then when you pedal, you can easily raise the saddle into correct pedaling height. I think another interesting use of the dropper post is in adaptive uses. Let's say you have an injury or an ailment or something that makes it difficult to just mount and dismount a bike. Being able to get the seat out of the way at a stop sign is really easy with a dropper post. Okay, those are the reasons why I've come around to using a dropper post on bikes beyond just mountain bikes. Let's finally talk about the Coast suspension dropper post. So the Coast has a 27.2 diameter, so that makes it compatible with lots of road and gravel bikes if you want to go that route, or even some older mountain bikes. It has external routing, which I actually prefer because it makes it super easy to install on your bike. You simply put the post in, secure the cable to your top tube, and mount the lever to your handlebar. This also makes it a great option if you want to move it from multiple bikes like I did. I had it originally on my Crest Bambora, and without cutting anything or having to fiddle with internal routing, I could simply put it on another bike like my Jones drop bar bike of the apocalypse. So super easy to install and a great choice if you want to move it between multiple bikes really easily. So let's talk about the suspension, because that's kind of, one of the key product features here. I found the suspension to be a little bit on the stiff side, which is actually a good thing for me because that's what I prefer. I did another video comparing two really popular suspension seat posts, and for both of them, I found that there was a lot of pedal-induced bob. Not so with the Coast suspension dropper. It is on the firm side, and I would call it a really passive suspension where it's mostly not working most of the time, except for those instances where you hit a really big bump or a drop and you forgot to unweight the saddle. This really takes out the sting from that potential kick in the crotch. So if you're looking for something that's going to smooth out all the small bump vibrations, then this probably isn't it. But if you want something that acts more like an emergency release valve for those instances where you didn't unweight quick enough or you hit a surprise bump, then the suspension on this post would work really well for you. In total, you get about 40 millimeters of tunable air suspension. What this means is there is a Schrader valve in the back of the seat post, and you can pump in more air or take out air to really get the suspension to where you like it. One thing I noticed is that the suspension is really dependent on how much post you have out there. So on my Crust Bora, where I didn't have a lot of exposed seat posts, the suspension was naturally a little bit stiffer because all that air was already compressed. But when I moved it to the Jones bike, I had more seat posts showing and the suspension became more active. So I actually had to put in more air pressure to get it to that nice kind of stiff suspension that I like. So that's one thing to note, is depending on how much exposed seat posts you have, that will also affect the feeling of the suspension. Also, when you're bottomed out, there is no suspension, so that is another thing to keep in mind. And let's say you don't care for the suspension on some rides, you could pump it up and it would effectively be just like a regular dropper post. So what are my likes and dislikes? The first big like is that it's super easy to install. Big thanks to the external dropper ratting on the one I got, although if you do want internal ratting, there is that option. Next big like is that it does make descending super stable. So if you're someone that is a skittish descender or has difficulty getting into the drops when descending, then this is a dropper post to check out. And lastly, I do like the suspension on this one. It's on the stiffer side for sure, but that's actually how I prefer my suspension on gravel bikes. So you don't get that pedal induced bobs, and it just kind of saves you from those bigger hits. So what are the dislikes? There's actually not a whole lot. One big one that some people might be really keyed into is the nature of the rebound of the suspension. It's not very dampened. It's just either up and back down. So if you want something super smooth and dampened in your rear suspension, then this probably isn't for you. Another potential con is that if you're a shorter rider like myself, you'll probably not be able to take advantage of all that travel and all that suspension. So it's really suited for gravel bikes with a sloping top tube, so you can have more exposed seat posts and really utilize all that travel. I think if you're a taller rider, this will be less of an issue, but if you're a shorter rider like myself and you generally have less than 5 or 6 inches of seat post showing, then unfortunately you won't get the full effect of the seat post. So overall, the Coast suspension seat post, if you'd asked me 2 years ago, I probably would have seen no value in it. But I've come around, and after having long-term experience with it, I've actually highly recommended. And at $179 MSRP, it's actually fairly affordable within the spectrum of dropper seat posts. So even if you're dropper post curious and don't want to spend a ton of money, the Coast suspension seat post is definitely one to check out. If you have any questions about the seat post, leave those in the comments below. If you're interested in buying it, there is a link in the description. It's an affiliate link. It does help the channel out. But let me know what you think. Do you guys ride with a seat post, or do you think it's all hype? I'm sure it will start a lively discussion as always. Hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, keep the supple side down.